right.
Okay,
I'm,
yeah, when you're
I'm,
ready.
I'm in Perth, in Australia, and we saw what you were doing probably not long after you started and you put your Facebook page up.
hmm
Um, a lot of people that I know resonate with the idea of having to do something to give the message across that we're not happy about these lockdowns. And I wanted to know from you, what was it that brought you to doing this and putting it together?
Right. Well, there's basically three messages I'm trying to get across with my exercise plan. So I might just go over those first, and then I can let you know sort of like the background story of how it came to be. So um, there's three main things I'm trying to bring awareness to in doing, I guess, what I would determine like as a publicity stunt. The first one is that the cure is worse than the disease. So obviously these lockdowns I know will have devastating effects and potentially deadly consequences to people that a lot of people don't realize. So when it comes to people being so scared about deaths from the virus, but yet they're not considering the deaths that will come from suicides, depression, drug abuse, the poor diets when people have economic problems, and also the lower standard of health. And not only that, to make up for the fact that people can't work, the government's going to pump a bunch of stimulus, this funny money that comes from nowhere, just gets printed out of nothing into the economy. And that's obviously going to destroy Australian savings as well as put us and our children into debt. So that's
Mm.
one of the first reasons that I'm doing this. The second reason is that when I started looking into the coronavirus information, because at first I didn't really think it was that big a deal. I just thought my family was stressing about something, but they stress about viruses all the time, and it would just, come to pass one day and all life will go back to normal. So when I realized it was a much bigger issue, I started looking into it, and then I learned that the coronavirus data that is being used for the government to make decisions is completely unreliable, and there's a growing body of experts that are questioning the data and the emergency measures that are taking place. And I have a lot of that information on my website, exercisingmyrights.com, where I list about 25 experts that are questioning this. And you can even read up for yourself the mortality rates that are being quoted are unreliable. The testing is inadequate, and we really have no idea of the total estimated number of cases of COVID-19. So when they try and quote these percentages, they have no idea what the denominator is. The numerator of deaths, they have no idea about, because they don't distinguish between who's dying with COVID-19, who's dying of COVID-19. And even on the WHO website, they admit that, when you code these deaths, even if you don't even test for COVID-19, you can code it as a COVID-19 death. So that's the second thing I'm trying to bring awareness to. And the third thing is that this government response in regards to the coronavirus is an absolute infringement on our God-given rights. So I believe the government is going about dealing with infectious disease in a completely wrong way, and it is basically stripping us of a lot of our fundamental liberties. So I do agree that people that are infected should be isolated, and obviously the high risk protected. And this is how God actually deals with infectious disease in Leviticus 13. But see, to lock down the sick is quarantine, but when you lock down the healthy, that's just tyranny, right? And the sad thing is that this hysteria that has got people so fearful, it's no longer like the minority that is oppressing us. It's actually the majority that is demanding this oppression. So that's what's really sad. And I think the government must deal with this in a way that preserves our rights. So those are the three main things that I'm trying to bring awareness to in exercising with this sign in the city. And how I came about this idea. It was about, because it hasn't been going for that long. Last Saturday was really the first Saturday that we went to the city. So it was about 2 weeks into the lockdowns when we could no longer have church gatherings, either indoors or outdoors. So there was a time when you could still have indoor gatherings, under, I think, 100 people. And then it went to the 2 by 2 meter rule. So, we were okay for 36 people. So we thought, okay, well, we'll go outside because, we can have up to 500 people outside. And then we had one church meeting outside, and then they banned gatherings altogether. So it was about 2 weeks into that me and a couple of men of our church got together to discuss what options we had moving forward, and the potential legal consequences of each option. So at one point in the conversation, I had the thought, you know what, like this is really bad, because you can't even protest these lockdowns because it's illegal for people to.
Democracy is suspended, isn't it? Isn't that's
Yeah.
the crux of this time now, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can't even protest it because it's illegal to gather together publicly. So this sort of led to the idea, well, it's legal still to go out and exercise, and the law doesn't specify, what you can or can't wear or carry. And if others like the idea and want to copy it, then no one gets in trouble because it's not an organized public gathering, and it's just people exercising in the same place at the same time and in the same way, 1.5 meters apart. So we had a bit of a laugh about the slogan, and then we had a laugh about the headband, and then we're coming up with funny names for exercise. And I thought, well, I got to do something about these draconian lockdowns. I got to say something. So it was worth a shot. I thought it was funny. The information's important, and I might get some heat for it personally, but I still think it's still within the confines of the current law. So there wasn't really much legal risks. And if I waited till next week, you might not be allowed to anymore, because in other countries you're not allowed to travel further than a kilometer from your home, and you can only exercise for half an hour. So it was kind of like, well, it's now or maybe never. So after that, I got to work on a website and then just put all the information on there supporting the 3 issues that we wanted to bring awareness to. And then we just committed it to God and tried to spread the word, and hopefully the message would resonate with people, and it would find support, and then people would get a laugh out of it, and that it would encourage others that are out there awake to what's going on to do something as well.
I think it's a brilliantly simple idea, and it says the message without being confronting or even aggressive. It's just stating what you want. I've got your sign here. I've just copied what you had. I don't know if you can read it properly on my screen.
All right, the cure is worse than the disease. That's great. You should take a picture of yourself with it. I want to get everyone's exercise equipment and share it on Instagram.
Well, I basically copied you. I even got the Liberty headband, but I look like JPC's female version when I wear mine.
This is why it's so funny. I hope I'm not giving too much away to the authorities, because it's going to get me in. Is it going to get me into more trouble? But I'm not organising a protest. I'm not organising anyone.
We're individuals,
just
making our own decisions here, and I decided that I would be exercising every Saturday at 2:00 in Kings Park in Perth.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice.
And I also went out at Wednesday at 9:00 as well, near the War Memorial there, and I happened to meet someone else from Citizens Awareness, Health Awareness, and we were both in Kings Park at the same time, and because we can walk 2 and 2, we happened just to be, social distancing, as it's called, and we got some wonderful feedback in the park. I was expecting maybe there might be 1 or 2 people saying, "What do you think you're doing?" But it was very, very affirmative of the message.
Yeah.
People are really questioning, with the numbers that we've got in Australia, why we're at this level of lockdown.
Yeah.
As in the cases, the number of deaths. That's what they're really questioning. How over the top now it seems, given where we're at.
Yeah, that was definitely our experience. I mean, in the city, there wasn't really that much people. It might have been because it was Easter weekend as well. But, we ran into, I counted we had probably about 7 times when people stopped us and sort of said something. And of those 7, 5 people were positive and sort of encouraging us and agreeing with the message of the sign that we were carrying. There was one instance where they kind of stopped to talk and ask us about it. So that gave us an opportunity to sort of talk about it. Because obviously, you're out there to exercise, but there's no law against when you're out there and you're seeing people to say hello and talk while social distancing. So, and we probably had one instance where, it was a pair of elderly people that were upset with what we were doing. And obviously they didn't know what our intention was behind it as well. So, yeah.
Well, it's not about threatening anyone who's vulnerable, is it? It doesn't mean that people are, necessarily threatened because we lift a lockdown. In my opinion, those people, if they feel they need to be quarantined, should be quarantined still. Definitely.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think this conversation is definitely being phrased as, those of us who are against the lockdowns only care about money and the economy, and those that, want lockdowns care about people. But, they always phrase it where, you're the cold and calculative one that doesn't care about people. But obviously, we care about people as well. I think the
Mm.
government should protect people that are at high risk and should quarantine people that are infected if it's, if assuming that it's a genuinely infectious disease that we should be concerned about, and that's a whole other question. But yeah, we definitely care about the lives, and I think what they're forgetting is that the lives that are going to be affected by the lockdowns, and that's one thing we're trying to, a message we're trying to get out there.
I've heard of quite a few old people, the ones that we're supposed to be protecting, are suffering terribly with isolation, and they're not coping with the lack of contact. Even the ones who are self-isolating at home, I think they I've heard lots of stories where they feel they don't get visitors anymore, and even family contact is so minimal that they're feeling very lonely.
Yeah, and can you imagine if you're an older person that chooses not to take the vaccine, and then your whole family is pro-vaccine, and then now that's going to, this hysteria has kind of ostracized them even more, because now their family won't even be one around. I don't know what, who knows what other consequences that will come of this, but I think that's what we're trying to bring awareness of, is just there are consequences to lockdowns that I don't think people realize that are of greater magnitude than any virus could do. And
Well, as they say, lifeline calls are up. I'm not sure how much it is now, but in the beginning it was 20%, over 20%. I've heard domestic violence is up by 75% in Australia, which is
oh,
really
right. Are you talking about the consequences since the lockdowns? All this stuff that's increased? Okay, interesting.
yeah. I just wanted to know what response you've had from other people. Have you had much contact and people reaching out?
Well, I would say, because it's still very fresh. So if you think about it, I posted the video just this week. I mean, time is going so slow during these lockdowns. It feels.
Groundhog Day.
I know, because your life now is just everything is empty. I mean, all my kids' activities that kept me busy all through the week, that made the week feel like it just flew past, has now all disappeared. Um, but yeah, it definitely exceeded expectations. I think after we sort of went to the city, we recorded a few videos. The me and the guy I was with, we were definitely feeling a little bit low going home, and just thinking, is this gonna get any traction anywhere? But when I shared it, and when I actually put the video together, I thought, hey, I think there's something here. It's quite funny. And when I shared it, yeah, it did kind of take off, and we sort of got the word out. I sort of chose a few organizations that I think would support it, and say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing, if you can help spread the word. And I don't, of all the organizations that responded, like, none of them responded negatively. There's probably organizations that get so many messages that haven't responded, but the videos are still getting likes and shares and things like that. So I feel like I don't know how I'm going to top the last one. The last video came together quite well. I'm not like a professional video editor or anything. Sometimes you just take some clips and it just comes together really well.
Well, I think you've given a light, hopeful feel to a lot of Australians. I know it was something that I saw and I thought that's a wonderful, positive thing to do. And exercising is and being outdoors is such an Australian thing to do as well. We want to be outside, and there are so many. You don't have to be any particular place. You can carry your sign anywhere, but you've chosen Parliament House in Sydney. Do you know
Yes.
if people are doing it anywhere else already?
Well, I guess we'll see what happens this weekend, right? I reckon it'd be great if people share with me their exercise plans and their exercise equipment, and take a
Mm.
picture of their headband of liberty. But yeah, so far I only know that you guys are exercising in Kings Park on Wednesday mornings and Saturdays. Yeah, so we knew we were onto something when the idea kind of wrote itself, as I was explaining before, and it's very funny because I feel I was joking about this with my exercise partner as we went out last Saturday, because we went out last Saturday to kind of scope out the area, see if the authorities would give us any trouble, and whatnot. Take some videos for the video that I released, and we were joking, saying, exercising, it has kind of become like the word of liberty, that if a cop comes and bugs you and says, oh, what are you doing, where are you going, all that sort of stuff, you just tell them I'm exercising. That's like the magical word to leave you alone. So
You're in New South Wales, aren't you?
yeah, that's right, I'm in
Yeah.
Sydney.
I've heard people have been stopped by police for not seemingly very reasonable um, reasons, I suppose, like being outside their house or driving somewhere that's not their work.
I don't know, I think the media, you know because like that's why what people were saying, oh, how could you go all the way to the city, aren't they going to stop you on the way? And it's, I drove all the way to the city. I live almost 50 kilometers from the city. So I drove all the way in, no cops in sight. Maybe it was because it was Easter weekend, or maybe they're all, stuck at the hotels, looking after people who are quarantined. But James Corbett, who is the host of the Corbett Report, he makes a really good point, saying that I think the media is trying to keep pushing this fear, and this is what is happening. It's trying to keep everybody scared and in their home, because if they actually went out and about, they'd realize that this is not actually the case. The police aren't all over the place bugging people, and I think most cops probably don't really want to bug people on laws that they think are foolish as well. Because there's probably a lot of police that are just enforcing the laws that they might not agree with either.
Mm.
So I think the media is creating a perception that everybody's on board, and you don't go out because you'll be in trouble and you're gonna get snitched on. But that's why this is a great way for us to go out. We've got a legal reason to do so and express our opposition to what is going on.
So we sit at about 6,000 plus cases in Australia at the moment, and most of those are in your state. They're sort of talking about removing some of the restrictions with Scott Morrison, and our Premier certainly is. I just wanted to know, have you had thoughts about how you go with removing these restrictions? Do you have any idea of how you'd like to see it happen?
Right, in terms of what my thoughts on how government should handle it.
Yeah, well, what would removing restrictions at the moment look like? Would it be very gradual, or do you think it should be um, all cafes and businesses should open? I'm just wondering, in your mind, if you've got a picture of it.
Yeah, well, the way I think government should handle infection, and I sort of outline my thoughts on the website too, on exercisingmyrights.com, on how the government should handle, quarantine and infectious disease. And the way I believe it should be handled is, if government is going to restrict somebody's freedom of movement and freedom to assemble and restrict their liberties, then they have to prove that they are a public health threat or some sort of
Mm.
threat. If they can't prove that you have the infectious disease, they have no right to take your liberties from you. So if the government cares about public health, which they do, I'm not saying they don't, if they do, then they should look into getting tests that are reliable, and doing tests like they do breath tests. They don't just tell everyone not to drive. I mean, you have to test you and show that you're drunk, and then therefore you're not allowed to drive. So there's a reasonable cause for you to be restricted of that liberty. So people that are infected, and they can test everyone coming in overseas, and if you're not infected, then you're free to go, and all that sort of stuff. They should definitely quarantine the infected. They should put in maybe extra protections for the high risk. So maybe, people can't just walk into a hospital at this time, and maybe you have to get tested before you get in. Retirement villages may have extra protections so that people can't just wander in there and things like that at times like this. But the rest of the population should be free to work and free to live. And even if you look up Dr. Knut Witkowski, he even says that would be a good thing. You want the schools to open, you want people to work, because those of us who are healthy and young, you want it to spread throughout the population so that a real herd immunity can be created. And then that way, this real herd immunity will actually protect those that are elderly and high risk. So I think all the restrictions should be removed, and government should just, restrict those that are infected and protect those that are high risk.
There is also the protective factor if those younger generations get it, that they will be protected in their old age as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about protecting one generation of elderly people, is it? Because a vaccine, even if they're not even sure if a vaccine will be okay for this virus. I don't know if you've done much research into the vaccine, but the last SARS vaccine was so dangerous that it killed all the ferrets and monkeys in their trials, and therefore they shelved the program because they found it was such a dangerous vaccine. They just weren't going to go forward with it.
Right.
Have you done research into that at all?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't claim to have the same level of knowledge in vaccines as you would have. I mean, it was many years ago. Like I'm coming up on my 10th wedding anniversary, 2 years before I met my wife. I remember watching a documentary by Dr. Shari Tenpenny on vaccines, and it just made sense to me that okay, well, if it's giving you an immunity, why then do we have to take boosters? And wouldn't it just be better? It's sort of the case of, well, if there's another way to go about it where you strengthen your immune system, get a true immunity, it's so much better. And then there's a question about the toxins that are in it and the risks associated, and if you can mitigate those with natural health. So that just made complete sense to me. And ever since then, like I've never, I don't get vaccines. I've never vaccinated any of my children. So yeah, but in terms of the specifics and all the latest developments and stuff, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on that, but I've definitely have not been pro-vaccine for a while.
So one of the issues, I don't know if you know this, with the biosecurity laws, which is why we are under this authoritarian style government or regime now, for want of a better word, is one of these factors is if they want to vaccinate you, they can without your consent. That's one reason we're concerned about the implementation of these laws at the moment. And I don't know if the Australian public is aware that that is something that could happen to them, or they could be medicated on the say-so of the government as well. So we're watching the flu shot at this time as well, because they've just brought it in for aged care and health workers. And we see that as a human right that needs protecting as well, that the ability to say no to whatever medications that you want to say no to without being coerced for work or travel or for entry into places.
Yeah, I'm not familiar at all with this Biosecurity Act. I mean, all I've been looking up recently is just the sort of human rights, I don't know what the terms are, the statements or whatever, that the human rights clauses that Australia aligns to. And I know there are statements that you can restrict liberty and things like that for the cause of public health. But I suppose it's one of those things where it's open to interpretation, right? Because, somebody might say, well, we have the right to just, lock everyone away in house arrest for the cause of public health. Whereas, I think the intention is at the individual level, like you can restrict an individual's right to assemble or to movement if they, as an individual, pose a risk to public health or public safety. I don't think you can just have these broad sweeping policies. And even the Human Rights Watch website, I think it's hrw.org, makes the statement that generally when these blatant overarching policies are put in place, they generally do not comply with human rights law. But yeah, I mean, I'm completely against the idea of compulsory and mandatory vaccines. I have no problem people knowing that. I don't think the government has a right to tell you what you can or can't put into your body. If certain substances, even like drugs, if certain substances like drugs have negative effects, I think it should be dealt with by social organizations like churches. Only once it leads to criminal activity, then the government should get involved there, because it's their job to punish crime, right? It's not their job to be our parents.
I'm just seeing if there's another question I had that I'd like to ask before we finish.
Sure.
Um, I think that's probably covered it. Are you a lawyer by background, or have you got a law background?
No, I'm not a lawyer by background. I pastor an independent Bible believing church in Sydney, Australia. It's called the Church in Liverpool. So we meet in a community centre in the suburb of Moorebank. So I guess when you're a Bible student, I guess you have some qualities of a lawyer, right? Because you've got a book of laws, and you sort of state your cases from those laws. So I think a lot of preachers would probably have a similar skill set where they can read some documents and think about how to logically think about them and apply them. But I also have members in my church that are quite knowledgeable about the things going on in the world, probably even more so than I am. So, talking with them, we sharpen each other, and we talk about these things a lot, and we keep each other informed.
You said that you were a bit disheartened because you thought the majority were asking for lockdowns in Australia. Um, I'm not as disheartened. I'm hoping there are more people that are realizing that it's not a great thing to be in this situation for months and months on end. Um, have Have you had people from all over Australia contacting you from various organisations, or not even from organisations, but I'm just wondering from your perspective, because you've put yourself out there. I know it's only been a week, but
Yeah,
we've shared you quite widely.
no, I think it's still quite fresh. Obviously, some people have messaged me, encouraged me. I'm not saying, when I say it's sad, I'm not saying I'm sad, because there's nothing for me to be sad about. I'm saved, and I have the Lord Jesus Christ, so I've got nothing to be sad about. But I just think it's sad that people, don't appreciate their liberties, and they're so fearful that they're willing to just give them away and beg the government to keep them safe. And I suppose that's what happens when people don't trust in the Lord to keep them safe. They want the government to keep them safe. So yeah, was that the question? Maybe I got off on a
So,
tangent, and I
were you
don't know.
surprised by how many, or by that reaction by the community to just go along with this removal of their freedoms, or do you think they didn't realise what they were sort of signing up for?
No, it didn't surprise me, because I guess I think most people are just persuaded by what they see on TV, right? What they hear from the media. So the reaction, I think, is just what is they're being told. And I suppose it's up to people like you and me to wake them up, share that information, try and be that salt and light in the world, so people will wake up to what is going on. And yeah, had quite a positive response. Like I appreciate. I think with anything, you kind of have to get the spark going. So we had this idea. We didn't know whether it would take root and people would sort of get what we're doing and get excited about it. But as we've shared it out, you know, definitely it's resonated with people. Not only are health groups like yourself getting excited about it, but liberty-minded groups as well. So if you guys can help spread the word, if you know of groups that might think this is a good idea and really like my exercise plan, make sure you share the website, share the page, because especially if you have contacts into those worlds, because when it's just a random coming to them and saying, hey, look, I'm doing this, I'm sure it's just lost in a sea of other messages that they get. But
Mm.
one organization I reached out to was Students for Liberty, and they've got quite a global reach, and they're quite excited about the idea, so they're going to promote this idea through their network as well. And they say that's a network of about 65,000 students. So hopefully that comes of something. But I suppose if I'm happy whatever it comes to. I'm just trying to get that information out there that's on the website.
Maybe the media might find you, Victor, and
Yeah, so
and just yeah, let people know that someone is speaking for maybe what we might call the other side. I don't know. What do you think of the media coverage generally in Australia?
Well, unless you're going to alternative sources of media, you're not getting both sides of the story. I mean, the mainstream media sort of own Facebook, all those fact checks. You share something on Facebook and then it gets flagged with fact check, and you can't even flag the fact check. So you get fact check, you can't flag that, and then on YouTube you've got all Channel 9, Channel 7 news coming up, so it's always in your face. So I think that's the unfortunate thing, right? We live in their world right now. We're on the back foot. So unless those of us who are awake rise up and do something about it, we're not going to push the tide the other way. So I think it's definitely in your face. But I'm ready. I'm ready for a fight. So I'm glad you reached out to me and wanted to do an interview. It gives me some good practice. This is kind of like practicing your interview skills. So hopefully when I get an opportunity to speak to the media, I'll be ready and I'll be able to say what a lot of people are thinking.
I don't think it would be a fight with you, Victor. You're too nice. So
that's why you kill people. You kill people with kindness. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove.
Yeah, thank you so much for today. And anyone in Perth, there might be people at 2 o'clock at the War Memorial in Kings Park on Saturday exercising, or in Sydney where Victor is at Parliament House at 2 o'clock Sydney time exercising on Saturdays.
Right,
thanks so much. And I think you might have to hang up the call.
Okay, I'll end this live stream and then we can finish up on Skype afterwards. See you later, guys. Thanks for tuning in.